Dead Man Tales is brought to you by SupplyHouse.com, home to over 180,000 plumbing, heating, and HVAC supplies. SupplyHouse.com launched their official app for pros on the go, bringing everything you need right to your fingertips. This fast shopping experience offers the ability to manage safe carts, scan barcodes, and quickly reorder products. Download the SupplyHouse.com app today on any Apple or Android phone for fast shopping on the go. From HeatingHelp.com, it's Dead Men Tales. I'm Dan Holohan. Gil Carlson passed away on April 28, 1994. He was 72 years old, and he was my teacher. At the time of his death, he held 7 U.S. patents and was recognized internationally as one of the foremost authorities on hydronic heating. Bob Dilg and Gil Carlson worked together at Bell & Gossett during the early 60s. Bob said, "One night after work, I found Gil standing in the parking lot. He looked bewildered, so I asked if he was okay. He said, 'Yes, but someone has stolen my car.' I told him I would go back inside and call the police, but Gil said no and asked if I could just take him home. Doris would have dinner waiting, and she would be worried if he were late. He would call the police from there. As we drove up to the house," Bob said, "I noticed Gil's car in the driveway. Gil saw it as well, and without any surprise whatsoever, he said, 'Well, I suppose Doris must have driven me to work today.'" Oh. I think Gil lived more in his mind than he did in this world. He churned constantly and always on his way toward places most of us couldn't imagine. He saw things that most of us missed. He and I were sitting in an office in Manhattan one day when he told me a story about a problem job he had visited in 1953, and not far from where we were sitting. Hydronic heating was still wearing diapers in 1953. Gil was with Jack Hanley, who was Bell & Gossett's Eastern Field representative back then. It seems that the installer had used monoflow tees on some perimeter radiation loops in this large office building. The problem, however, was that the pressure drop through each monoflow circuit was much too high. The water refused to flow through the radiators. It stayed in the main. Water will do that to you. It's lazy, and it loves the path of least resistance. After a few calculations, Gil suggested that the contractor use small booster pumps on each circuit and run the main pump continuously. If the contractor wanted, he could cycle the booster pumps on and off with thermostats, and that would give him zoning as well. Can you imagine the look on that long-gone contractor's face? And that's how primary-secondary pumping came to be. Today we use primary-secondary pumping all the time without giving it much thought. But isn't it nice to know it all began with some creative thinking on a problem job in Manhattan? It all began inside Gil Carlson's mind. Gil graduated from Purdue University as an engineer and went to work for Bell & Gossett in 1946. He retired from there as the Director of Technical Services in 1988. He also served on the Industry Advisory Committee of Purdue's Herrick Laboratory for 32 years. In 1953, when I was 3 years old, Gil joined the American Society of Heating and Ventilating Engineers, which later became ASHRAE. Not long after joining, and in collaboration with B&G's chief engineer, Harold Lockhart, Gil presented a paper to ASHRAE. He called it Compression Tank Selection for Hot Water Heating Systems. At the time, the Lockhart-Carlson paper represented breakthrough thinking in the science of hydronic heating. It greatly simplified the compression tank selection process and saved countless hours of labor. That first paper led to a second, the famous point of no pressure change thesis, which proved that hydronic systems operate best when the circulator is on the supply side of the boiler, pumping away from the compression tank. I borrowed liberally from Gil's thesis when I wrote my book Pumping Away in 1994. Nowadays, I sometimes get credited with original thinking because of that book. But the truth is, when it comes to hydronics, I haven't had an original idea in my life. It was all Gil. He gave me a way of seeing it all in my mind's eye. Bob Dilg once told me that Gil wanted him to go to college because he had no degree. Gil wanted him to grow. Bob said, "He constantly encouraged me to further my education by taking night courses. When I told him that any degree would be years away, Gil just smiled and said, "But you'll be smarter every day." Gil would also take the time to share what his fine mind held. He could make a novice feel comfortable with even the most advanced systems because he had this wonderful ability to explain technical topics in a visual way. He didn't deal in mumbo-jumbo, and he didn't pick nits. He would always say, "A difference to be a difference has to make a difference." And that stays with me because it applies to so many things in life, and not just hydronics. A difference to be a difference has to make a difference. He also used to look at me and say, "Always remember that whatever goes into a tea must come out of that tea." And that's what made me see the simple beauty of hydronics. It was all about pressure differential, or what he called delta P. Look to the T, and you will see the pure beauty of hydronics. Whatever goes into a tea must come out. But how? See it in your mind's eye. That's how Gil taught. Bob Dill said he was singularly, seemingly unimpressed with his own genius. One time I went into his office and he was holding a dirty piece of cardboard. It was probably from the back of his favorite yellow sketch pad. He had cut it in a circle and he had drawn some marks on it with a pen. I asked him what it was and he told me he used it for calculations. He never could find the book or charts he wanted. In any event, what he had in his hand eventually became the Bellingosset system sizer. He just never realized that that piece of cardboard he had cut and marked up might be of use to the rest of us. Time went by, and I came to be the caretaker of that round piece of cardboard that Gil had cut by hand. Gil gave it to his friend Jim Hope when he retired, and Jim gave it to me, and I gave it to Robert Bean, and it is now the Carlson Holohan Industry Award of Excellence, which I think would have pleased Gil. It certainly pleases me. Once while on a problem job in Philadelphia, Gil took another piece of cardboard. This time it was the cardboard tube from a roll of toilet paper. He drew some marks on it and told the contractor to take him to the ball valves that serve the radiators. He held the cardboard tube over the ball valve's handle and using a slide rule, calculated where the valve handle should be to provide the proper flow to that radiator. This led to his patent for what became the Bellingosset Circuit Center. Gil saw the magic and the potential in ordinary objects of everyday life. Things like cardboard. Imagine that. Bob Dill said he was so prolific that he would have these overlapping ideas. He couldn't keep up with his own mind. He once tried a dictaphone, but that only made things worse since the secretary would type what he had said. And the typed copy rarely made any sense. It was part of one thought mixed with another and smeared over a third and a fourth. And he went back to using pen and paper. Bob also told me that ITT bought B&G during some rough recessionary years, and they began to cut costs by reassigning some people and letting others go. These cuts troubled Gil because he always knew that there was so much to do, and his mind kept churning out one idea after another. Bob told me that there was one event that Gil never even knew about. An ITT man saw Gil strolling the hallway in his fashion with that faraway look in his eye that signaled he was deep in thought. The ITT man raised the question among others as to who this person was, what he did, and whether he was necessary on the payroll since he seemed to lack urgency. This, of course, was completely true, Bob said. Gil never lived by the watch and sometimes had to be encouraged to go home. Thankfully, more knowledgeable heads prevailed that day, and Gil's position was saved from the head count reduction. As time went by, Gil came up with improved procedures and charts for liquid viscosity pumping. He gave the hydronics engineering community a new way to balance flow by trimming pump impellers. He wrote papers on air handling and antifreeze design, as well as on flow to heat transfer relations. He published more than 100 technical articles in Heating, Piping, Air Conditioning magazine and the ASHRAE Journal. And that is the stuff I was raised on. During the 1970s, he developed new ways to design solar heating systems, cooling tower systems, and variable volume pumping systems. His fine mind ranged over a very broad field, but mostly he was a teacher. Over the years, he conducted hundreds of seminars, talks, and symposiums throughout the world. ASHRAE honored Gil with their Fellow Award. their Distinguished Service Award, and in 1986, the prestigious Life Member Award. And he was my teacher. He taught me that whatever goes into a tea must come out. And I learned from that simple truth. And it made me see the simple beauty of how hydronic works. And when he passed from this life, I thought about how what goes into a life must also come out of that life. And so much came out of his. And I am forever grateful that he was born. Well, I hope you enjoyed that tale. And if you did, please share it with your friends. And please subscribe to this podcast. I have many more Dead Man Tales to share with you. Thanks so much for being here.